Hello, everyone. This is Whitney Will from Star Heart Astrology. And today I am going to be talking about the archetypal life path that is being and living the story of being a Taurus rising individual. Now, this is the second version that I've made of this video, I don't know, 3 years after the first version. And the first version was not attended to properly. And I was still exploring this concept. It did not sink deep enough into what is truly an embodied and soulful life path. I accessed the truth of that one through the mind, and that is not necessarily the way to get into this. In order to do service to the depth and the power of Taurus, I am remaking this video with everything that I have learned since then. If this is your first time to my channel, welcome. In this series, I explore not just the rising sign or the sign of the ascendant as a particular part of the chart, but as a kind of beginning and centering principle for the whole chart. Now, this way of looking at the chart uses and relies upon whole sign houses and only whole sign houses. If you are not using that house system, this video will not make sense. However, if you have not used that house system, please listen to the video and use it as an exploration into the insights that a whole sign house system can provide. I also have videos on my channel about how to see your chart in a whole sign house system, and there are a lot of resources explaining those. So let's get into Taurus rising. With Taurus rising, we have a chart with Taurus on the ascendant, embodying the whole first house. And this is such an important and heavy task. Not heavy in a grief or tragic way, but heavy in a weighted blanket kind of way. Taurus is the sign that is fully married to the concept of matter, the mother, right? Matter, the concrete materialism, and not just the materialism of how it's often talked about. Oh, I want this thing and this thing and this thing. That's not really materialism, because that is more about how my things represent something about me and not about the power in the things themselves. It is not about how craftsmanship or weight or feel or texture creates a soulfulness of matter. And then we use the matter of our body to experience things in a sensuous way. This is a way of being in the world and experiencing the world that our modern Western culture views as primitive, that we often use language around like indigenous, that we alienate from the colonialism and the spread of the intellectual and oldly rational ideas that take the spirit out of the matter of the world. Taurus is a sign, and the Taurus rising experience is countercultural in that it is working against that movement and those assumptions. Some powerful books to heal that wound are Thomas More's Care of the Soul. This is an introduction to depth psychology, and even just reading the introduction to this book, where it puts soul back into matter, is in many ways a summary of the Taurus rising experience. This book, The Spell of the Sensuous, which talks about all of the sensual ways of knowing the world and how we've been separated from them. This is another great book. I think that also Thomas More's book, The Reenchantment of Everyday Life, and many other wonderful works to that effect. I also think any, right, cookbook seriously written and seriously studied is a piece of that. Works of design are a piece of that, because Taurus is about learning to be fully present in the material world. And in order to do that, we have to learn how to feel safe in what Mary Oliver calls the soft animal of our body, that Taurus is very concerned with. Taurus says, refutes the ideas of human exceptionalism, and instead offers an invitation back into the sensuous and sensual ways of knowing, and a curiosity about what it feels like to be inside of our bodies in this world. Now, Taurus risings are the children of Venus, but not the technical, justice-oriented, social harmony Libran Venus, but the bodacious, spring, garden, abundance, fertile Venus, the enjoyment of the senses. Now, this is not a straightforward task, really, for anyone, but also for Taurus risings. Maybe for some of them, it might be perceiving the world through the matter that is around you, through your being embedded in it, is an essential task. And wherever your natal Venus lives in your chart will connect the topics of that house with your feelings of security or insecurity in the everyday, in your kind of baseline feelings in your body. If you have Venus well placed in a night chart, this might come easier, feeling empowered and present in your body. If you have Venus in a complicated location in a day chart, this process will take longer, and it will take more of your life to learn embodiment and groundedness, right? The Taurus risings tend to have bodies that are more solid and less kind of waifish than maybe air sign bodies. There is this kind of the fertility goddesses of old, right? What does it mean to be solid and powerful and to feel the weight of matter? So Venus will show you your journey. But of course, the sign on the ascendant and the identifications of the ascendant, while they may say something about what it feels like, what your baseline feels like, in terms of what it feels like to be you in the world, how you present yourself, how you orient yourself towards new experiences. That is just the beginning, because the gift and the task, fortunately or unfortunately, of Taurus Rising is be present in your body. And that sets the tone and is the mantra for the functioning of the other houses and what you bring to your everyday interactions and how you help the rest of us balance out all the cosmic archetypal niches of how to be a human being in the world. Now, your resources and your talents stem directly from that. Gemini rules your second house of like raw talent, resources, how you acquire resources, how you hold on to resources. The second house with Gemini shows that there is a raw gift when you are present where you are, patterns, and you understand things and you know what is happening. This kind of knowledge that you have and the insight that you gain from doing the radical act of being present in the world and saying what you know is a gift and a talent. It also means that things change, because if you are paying attention to the truth and the messages from your body, you have, right, a kind of flighty experience of the world, because the more attention we're paying to actually what's happening, the more variety of experiences we are getting, and we can talk about them. And now our ease in talking about them and sharing those ideas is going to depend on where Mercury falls in our chart as the ruler of that house, right? There are complicated and less complicated places. Lucky you if it happens to fall in the house itself or in the sign of its rulership and exaltation in Virgo. But everywhere else is also a sacred journey. It can make your finances do weird things around Mercury retrogrades, because you do have your finance house ruled by Mercury that's going to go retrograde 3 times a year. And so just flagging that can help you retain that Taurian equilibrium that is so nice within the heart of Taurus and where it prefers to be within that serenity. Yeah. So once you can see the chaos coming, understanding that like a check is going to get lost, or, right, you're going to have a fraudulent charge on your bank card, and this is especially during Mercury ruled perfection years when those hit home a lot. Or if Venus, the ruler of your chart, is in Gemini, is there, right? There's going to be an emphasis on how do we understand the inherent dynamism of Gemini and how that can be frustrating to the steadiness of Taurus only when we see them as at odds and not assisting each other. Cancer is your third house, which means, right, the third house being the place of familiarity, of siblings, of your neighborhood, of the people that you're talking to, right? Cancer, we want things, again, to feel safe, to feel comfortable, to respond to us emotionally appropriately, because we want the sweetness and the safety that is required in order to really lean into the depth of emotional wisdom that comes through Cancer and the nurturing potential. So living in a place that you find beautiful, that feels safe, that allows you to walk in and out of that Cancerian pool, to have harmony and safety in your relationships with your siblings, if you have them, or your chosen family. Now, this is the space that is ruled by the moon. So we would look for where the moon is in the chart. And this can speak to the house that the moon rules is always the most changeable house from day to day. But the moon also rules the tiniest little bits of time. And one way to think about the third house is that the third house is your weekly planner. And so there is a harmony between the third house and the moon. The moon's planetary joy is in the third house because it is concerned with those tiny chunks of time that are governed by the moon. And so leaning into having a sense of routine, like a natural order that things go in rather than a rigid schedule, will be very helpful for Taurus risings, because this is the house that is most influenced by how you feel in the moment. And so having a flexibility in your routine, so that if you're feeling low energy, if you're feeling grief, you can shift things and move things around. Living close to family where you can have multiple close relationships that you attend to in a daily way can be helpful, right? As long as they are supportive to that Cancerian tenderness. Leo. Oh my goodness. The fourth house in Leo. This will entirely depend on where your sun is, because where your sun is the ruler of this house. But these often show individuals that had to be amazing in their family of origin, or were raised in a culture of our family is special, our family is exceptional. Maybe we're performers, maybe we have this really cool family history story, but there's this kind of epic side to it, which can be very exciting and very fun to take on when you're a child, but can also be pretty exhausting as you get older. And in some ways, we can see that Taurian response is like, whoa, I'm trying to ground some of that. Part of me coming fully into myself is grounding down from this epic myth of who I had to be in the world, of how much my parents projected on me that I was going to be amazing. Or, right, when we've got more complicated things going on in that house, like Saturn or something else, right, the pressure to both be amazing and parents telling you that you constantly weren't good enough, right? This complicated familial story of exceptionalism that can be overwhelming. The sun is going to show us where we were pressured into that, how that journey went. So you can check out the sun for that space. The fifth house is the house of play, of freedom of expression, of the things that are super fun to us, of sexuality, of conception, of pregnancy, of the delight of children, and the freedom of exploration. Your fifth house is ruled by Mercury, which gives a kind of intellectual bend to those things often. This is Taurus risings tend to be, as long as you have positive placements within your fifth house or Mercury is in a good place. This is hobbyists. These are the arts and crafts artisans. And that again leans back to this Taurian understanding and knowledge that matter has meaning. And so whether we are fiber artists or wood carvers or antique boat restorers or whatever we are, there is a meticulousness and a devotion to the material as the place for self-expression. There can be an analytical bend to this house. So having your hobbies be, right, again, depending on where Mercury is, be more technology, more analytical, more puzzles. This is a great house for people who like puzzles. I find this to be a kinship house because I'm an Aquarius rising and we have Mercury in the fifth house, so there can also be board games as part of this, especially board games that involve the management of resources. So, like Settlers of Catan or something, the healing arts, herbalism, gardening, gardening being this great resonance between Virgo and Taurus. The sixth house is interesting. And in this way, the Taurus rising charts mirror the Scorpio rising charts, where both the first house and the sixth house are ruled by the same planet. And that is an interesting thing to think about because talked about the first house as the baseline of your well-being, the baseline of how it feels to be in your body. The sixth house is all the maintenance work. It is the active principle of how do we deal with the fact that we are mortal and we do have a body and it requires daily, weekly hygiene. It requires feeding. If we live, we always have chores that we need to do to take care of our spaces, to take care of our people. There's a kind of unfun piece of that, the sixth house being the place of illness, of injury, but it's really the place of the work that we do to maintain our bodies. And that when we do have a Scorpio rising chart or a Taurus rising chart, because Scorpio risings have Aries in their sixth, both ruled by Mars, right? Those two things are very well connected. So often the first house has a lot to do with our mental health. And if we're finding that is suffering, we got to work on the sixth house stuff because those two things are connected. And, right, when we are feeling good in our first house, the sixth house stuff is probably also doing well. They are intimately connected. With Libra in the sixth house, we need to think beyond just, oh, it's just making sure that I'm showering regularly and that I'm eating healthy or whatever that we're doing to maintain that. But the sixth house points to a need for beauty and serenity and harmony in the environment, such that it can be an act of taking care of yourself to make sure the colors of your bedroom are soothing and beautiful, to rearrange art on the walls, to hang art on the walls, to create an environment that allows you to feel safe in your body and in your nervous system. Now, Libra is also the place of justice. And so activism, specifically around taking care of the natural world, could be another way to put into action the work of Libra, to do policy work, to do justice work, to do social justice work, can really be a powerful care task, both of bringing you into the present when you feel any amount of despair over the state of the world, but also as a way of affirming to yourself the values that you have, reminding yourself who you are and that you are not powerless. Because there are moments where everyone's sixth house can leave them feeling powerless. And that is part of the connection that I make with Mars having its planetary joy in the sixth house, being that is our access to our personal power, our will, our ability to make decisions and take action. So taking action in a Libran way within that space can be very good for our mental health and our overall well-being. The seventh house is Scorpio. And this is the side of Taurus that is okay. There is some kink in Taurus, right? You may look all calm on the surface. The Scorpio rising, seventh house, there are certain conditions of the seventh house that might speak to real danger, real harm, right? This is a very interesting place. One of the shadows of Taurus rising is its need to be in control. And if our need in our daytime life and self is to be in control, we have a deep, mm, soulfully erotic, not necessarily sexually erotic, although sometimes it shows up in that way. We have a deep need for danger, for the edge, for the experience of being out of control. We don't want to be the rock and static as Taurus rising, but we use the incredible power of being able to center and ground ourselves in tension with these wilder scorpionic forces that are either pulling things towards destruction or entropy or power struggles or those dynamics, right? Taurus does not make sense without Scorpio, and there must be a place in the chart where you flirt with the edge of where pleasure turns in to pain, right? Which can also just be the agony of a dramatic relationship or some of the harder truths. I had one of my dearly beloved Taurus rising friends talking about having the experience of the closer you get to somebody, the more intimate you get with them, the farther away they feel. And what a harsh scorpionic truth that you cannot actually, without completely psychologically and spiritually merging with someone, which is only safe done in moments of ecstasy, whether religious or sexual, right? But only for a moment before you come back down into the material world and encounter our separateness, which for whatever reason we have decided, we have made the agreement that we will experience in this lifetime. That is can be a harsh and devastating experience. Now, again, with the seventh house being ruled being Scorpio, we have to look for Mars. And so there is a dynamic between Venus and Mars that is inherent, right? Venus and Mars form opposite rulerships. They're opposite planetary archetypes. We've got Venus, which is synthesizing, healing, growing things back together, maintaining harmony. And then we have Mars, equally as powerful and necessary in the world, but does the job of separating and cutting and getting through and causing discomfort. And so there can be a tension in that space. And the more that we feel ourselves grounded in, especially if you have Venus and Taurus, a truly Taurian, Venusian space, the more we can project all of that Marsy stuff, all of those, right, scorpionic, uncomfortable truths, we can project that outwards onto other people and we can see ourselves as solid and safe and reasonable and other people as uncomfortable and dangerous and antagonizing. And so when these houses are very polarized, then the seventh house becomes not something that other people can unlock inside of us or bring to us or do to balance the weight of our ascendant, but some place where we throw shade and insults and project, right? Seventh house is the place of marriage and partnerships. It is also the place of our enemies. And enemies, not in the sense of like 12th house, you're being hunted by a faceless mafia, but enemies like the Draco Malfoys to our Harry Potters, the space of nemesis. I am equal to you, and part of me honing who I am is engaging the way that your energy challenges me because Scorpio challenges Taurus, and Taurus challenges Scorpio. I've seen beautiful marriages between Taurus risings and Scorpio risings, right? There we have that balance. The eighth house. This, I love thinking about this. I love the eighth houses of Scorpio risings and Taurus risings because for some reason it feels comical to have Sagittarius in the eighth house. And that is because, right, the truths and the mission of Sagittarius and the thoughts of Sagittarius that propel us out of this atmosphere. Whoever controls the narrative seems to have more power. Whoever controls what we are allowed to believe and what those belief systems do and how they inherently destabilize us, right? That is an act of power. And there we can see a religious connection between the fourth and the eighth houses, right? Taurus risings, they have fire in their shadow houses. So this passion simmers underneath. And sometimes we are the ones who are trying to keep it repressed. Sometimes the native Taurus risings and everybody else. And sometimes we are using that hidden and private space as a kind of sacred pyre to destroy the former versions of ourselves or discover the new ones. Now, it happening in the eighth house means that will be an intimate experience. And the discussion of these ideas that change your mind and these deep, huge questions are attempted with an other only once we have vetted them and deemed them appropriate to enter the eighth house. The eighth house is the place of what is taboo, of therapy, of things that we are not sure if they are useful to us or not. And so there is a kind of alchemical lab in the eighth house of Taurus risings, which is integrating the scorpionic and trying to turn it into interpersonal gold, which of course means absolving us from shame and the integration of the individual into a sense of wholeness. Sagittarius is the sign that brings it all together into a core of meaning that gives purpose. And so we can really do that within the context of our close relationships if we can allow ourselves as Taurus risings. I'm not a Taurus rising, I'm just using this language to break through our resistance and our need for control. Taurus risings with Capricorn in the ninth house can have a belief and a trust in the status quo. And this is part of being present. Half of us are living in the future. We're living in the past. We're living in our fantasies, our dark fantasies, our bright fantasies, right? We do not take most of our life orienting cues from what is actually happening around us. And that is why Taurus rising is radical. When we have the ninth house, the place of higher education, the place of where we go to integrate things into our personality through the mind, where we go to explore that which is beyond us and that which is beyond our immediate experience, the third Cancer house, right? We are studying what Capricornian institutional structures are already in place. What does the world look like now? That will inform this kind of earthiness of what is real. And then we step into the 10th house, which is, of course, this paradox that if you study what exists in the now, the dynamic nature inherent in everything that is animated, right? In every ensouled being, it actually propels you to do work that is beyond that. David White has this beautiful poem, Just Beyond Yourself. It's where you need to be. Half a step into self-forgetting. The rest, like, confirmed by what you'll find. But the 10th house, the place of the life's work, has transformed the solidity and the power of presence into visionaries of the future in the realm of thought and rationality, right? These are paradoxically mavericks. We've got the Taurus rising that is like, I am solid in my body and my work in the world and my face in the world and the things that I accomplish in the world are not standard in a Uranian Aquarian way. We look for Saturn as to what both of these things look like, right? Saturn rules Capricorn, traditionally rules Aquarius. It is only the Saturnian Capricorn with the way that it kills the animism in the world by concretizing it into inhuman systems and institutions and establishments that catalyzes and galvanizes the Aquarian Saturn to stand up in resistance and dream a different world. You can only know that there has to be a different world if you are fully present in your body and you can feel on a cellular heart level the injustice of the dead wasteland world that Capricorn can create if it goes unchecked without a worthy opponent, without a revolutionary response. So, Taurus, the sleeper cells of the astute weirdos. That's what I have to say about it. Okay. So then, of course, any revolutionary, any visionary needs a community that gives a side eye to consensual reality, that understands the spiritual, that can hold the softness, that is incredibly creative and Venusian, that is creating a world that feels better for everyone, not in theory, in experience, in embodiment. The space of spiritual safety and holy longing and the Piscean 11th house. These are your people, these are your allies, these deep feelers, these creative visionaries, right? That sensitivity, that understanding, that Rumi quotation, there is only one flesh to wound, right? Ultimately, my experience of the world is a universal experience of the world, and your experience of the world, with enough Piscean empathy, I can step into and understand that we are participating in the same thing. And, right, if we have a core of kindness and compassion, we want that to feel good for everyone. This is the space of compassion. This is inclusivity. We're going to look for where Jupiter is to see what feels good here or what doesn't feel good here. If Saturn is here, we can have a holy longing for that space and yet somehow feel blocked from accepting it. If Mars or Mercury is there, then we're creating that space. If Venus is there, we are a magnet for those people. If the moon is there, oh my goodness, then we are empaths. We are feeling everyone else's feelings about those spaces. That's a lot to hold if your moon is there. I hope you have some tender Piscean support in that space and some grounded Taurus stuff. Okay, Aries. Aries in the 12th house of the chart, in the blind spot of the chart, in the place of hidden enemies, of surprises that come out of nowhere, and the stuff that we kind of trip over because we didn't turn the lights on. This is Aries is the spark of selfishness, both in the positive sense of that word, and Aries is the courage to choose yourself as the individual over other people and to take a stand, right? Taurus is the beginning of the insight of that's great, but it's not enough, right? We can't start a war without the ability to feed the army, right? We have to start a fire to cook food, but if we don't have the food, then the fire doesn't matter, right? When we first come into being, then the next thing we need is food and shelter and safety in our physical spaces. We have to ground the inherent divinity in the spark of creation. There can be incredible discomfort because Mars can destroy the safety that Venus creates. Now, the 12th house is not just the place that we're blind to. In fact, mostly it's the place we're blind to in ourselves. And so that can be, right, where our sense of what we need and our action to get it, we cannot control the consequences of, we cannot control the impact. And that can be the place of our undoing, and that can be the place of our deep wounding. And part of the Taurus rising work is that you will learn about your missteps in the Aries space, in your 12th house space, your relationships from your lovers and your enemies and your friends who might take a turn of being all of those things in a full cycle. And it can come back around, right? Doesn't matter which one they land on, you can do more. We are learning from Mars. Mars is that action, that uncomfortable ability that we have to break, the serenity that is the explicit value of Taurus for the individuality to move us forward or to deepen our experience of things. And that's what I have for you. Thank you so much for being here, for going on this journey through the archetypal life path of Taurus with me. I would love to talk to you more about it, to work with you. If you're on this path, if your lover, if your child is on this path, please go to my website and book sessions. That's what allows me to do this work, and share this video if it really resonated with you. Thank you so much for being here. I hope this was helpful.